Hello everybody and welcome back to World of Warships Legends. My name is Spartan Elite 43 and tonight we are doing something different. We are back with another tier list. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I made one a while back with the tier 7 battleships. This time, back by popular demand, this time we're doing legendary tier. Now there are a few ships that I don't currently own at legendary tier, aka the Colbert, aka the Holland, the Henri the Fourth. I'm working on it, but I don't have them. And the Zhao. Again, have it, or I'm working on them, but I don't have them yet. So with that, I'm not going to be able to add them to this list, but they are currently available, and maybe we'll talk about them as honorable mentions later on, and we'll try to go over what I've seen about them or whatever to try to make them, make it into the list. But for now, we're going to just deal with what we have. Now, I've got to throw out a little bit of a disclaimer for you guys. Everything that I'm about to say and place is based on my own opinion and my own playstyle of the ships. Your results may vary. So, as always, I have created this as its own little thing. So to all of y'all out there that may have a difference of opinion than me, I recommend that you come in here and you use this template that I have created, as long as you give me credit in your video, if you're making a video or if you're just having fun, no big deal. But use this template and make your own opinions. I'll be glad to see it. Just tag me in the video or something, and I'll stop by in the comments section and say how wrong you are about everything. Because it's the internet and I can only be right, right? Right. Anyway, so obviously it's a basic tier list. S, A, B, C, D. S being the best, D being the worst. And we have all of the ships that I currently own at legendary tier down here. You're welcome. And I made sure that their names are relatively readable. So there you have it. I'm sure I've probably misspelled something and you guys will let me know about it. But without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? Now we're just going to go from left to right. There's no order to this. I just uploaded the images after I made them. So there's no real order to this. But we're going to go ahead and make this happen. So first up we have the Alaska. Now, I'm going to do my best to talk about each ship as we place them, or before we place them, and talk about why I placed them in the place that I placed them. So, the Alaska. Super cruiser. Absolutely insane. Great ship all the way around. Very tanky, especially with the new buffs, but accurate, hard-hitting guns. Great with HE and AP. Has good radar, sonar, all the things that you could ever ask for out of it. So, where would I rank the Alaska? Honestly, I would say Alaska is a solid A tier. It's not S tier. It's very, very good. But it also doesn't quite live up to S tier ships. And you'll see the S tier when we get up there. All right. The reason that I would rank at A tier instead of S tier is simple. DPM. You get into a gunfight with a ship that has a better DPM, aka Des Moines, or probably any of the new heavy cruisers that are coming in. It struggles. It's very good against battleships. Struggles against destroyers just due to the fact that it struggles to kill the destroyer faster than its radar goes out. So for that, Alaska and probably the rest of the super cruisers are going to be A tier and below. They are very good at what they do. But when it comes to being able to just win the game by themselves, which I think S tier really needs, I feel like S tier has to be capable of carrying the lobby. You know what I'm saying? Just by themselves as a solo player. Anything that I put in S tier should be able to just solo the lobby if they have to, right? Now, Alaska, still very good in my opinion. Bergonia. Oh no. Where am I going to put the Bergone, guys? Personally, I would put Bergonia at a B tier. I'm not saying it's a bad ship, but for me, in my playstyle, I don't like the Bergonia as much as I do some of the other battleships at the tier. I rarely ever play the Bergonia. It has some good things going for it, but I feel like the 15-inch guns really lack in certain areas when it comes to really punishing people at the tier. Now, I've seen some amazing games out there, but most of the time when you see amazing games, one of two things is occurring. One, they're switching to HE and just burning people down, which, let's be honest, any ship in the game can burn stuff down, get a good bit of damage while burning damage. So I'm not really impressed by that. The other one is just straight up broadsides for days, right? Just all the broadsides you could ever ask for. You go up against like well-angled people and stuff, like you have no choice in the Bergogne but to switch to HE. And the HE isn't amazing. Like, yes, you can set fires with it, but it's not Conqueror HE, you know? Like, it's not as dangerous as a lot of the other battleships are in terms of all of that. So, for that, I personally put Bergonia B tier, right? Now we have a newcomer, the Cristoforo Colombo. Yeah. Personally, I love the ship. It's got a great gimmick with the secondaries, the SAP secondaries. It's got hard-hitting guns and lots of them. It's got the smoke screen to allow it to get into some sneaky positions. But it does kind of... It kind of lacks the survivability. Yes, it has a lot of heals, but they're not amazing heals. And it doesn't have a lot of hit points initially. You know what I'm saying? So for that... As much fun as the Colombo is, I personally think that Colombo is probably right there with Bergonia at B tier for me. As much as I love the ship, and I do love to take the ship out, I like to have a good time in it, but if we're ranking these on best to worst, I think that it's solidly mid-tier, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a solid performer. You can have a lot of fun in it, but I think personally... the lack of hit points and the fact you have to rely on those heals, plus its entire game plan is to get up close and personal, which can be difficult. And on a lot of different maps, it can be really, really difficult, especially with the proliferation of all the destroyers out there. Even though this thing can absolutely melt destroyers, it also has to find the destroyers first, and a lot of times it doesn't do so well in that regard. Plus, SAP secondaries are very good, but they don't set fire, so you lack that damage over time that you get with, say, a Schlieffen. So, for me, solid mid-tier, no problem. Conqueror. Conqueror is one of those fun ships that is just insanely good. It's got great AP, it's got great HE, it's got decent health, but huge 3D printer on board for that heal. With the right builds, this thing is absolutely insane. Personally, I run Azure Lane Nelson, so you know when I slap people for HE, I'm usually hitting them for multiple fires and hitting for 15 to 20,000 damage, which is insane. Like, it is literally thermonuclear warfare when you take the Conqueror into battle. However, there are a lot of ships that give the Conqueror a fit, aka the Mino, the Yama. Yes, Conqueror and Yama can both kind of like cancel each other out because it basically depends on who starts the fire first, you know. If the Yama and the Conqueror in a 1v1 duel, I like my odds in the Yama first, but Conqueror is fully capable of burning down a Yama in very short order as well, especially when you consider that the Yama's damage control usually only lasts like 10 to 15 seconds. The immunity period. So as soon as you trigger that damage control, you have a very short amount of time before you get set on fire again. And so Conqueror in that regard is pretty disgusting. So for that, I have to put the Conqueror A tier. It's very, very good. But there are ships out there that just absolutely chew this thing apart. And Mino comes to mind, as well as the Yama. Like, very much just tear it apart. Even Montana tears this thing apart because of the sheer amount of penetrations you can get. So for that, Conqueror, very good. Still lacks to be able to be called an S tier, in my opinion. So now we're on to the Daring. Daring is a fantastic ship. It is a little bit of everything, right? But it's very general purpose, right? It can do gunboat things. It can do destroyer torp boat things. It has great get out of jail free card smoke screens, which I personally love. I've loved it all the way back to the Lightning. with a specific commander that wakes this thing up, which is the Grognak the Barbarian, whatever his name is, the orc from the Warhammer crossover. If you don't have that particular commander, this ship just isn't as good. Is it still good? Sure, but it isn't as good. So for me, Daring, as good as it is with that orc commander, or whatever you want to call him, the ogre commander, orc commander, whatever the Warhammer version of that guy is, that is what makes the Daring just that step above, right? Without it, it's decidedly mid-tier. And again, I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this. I love the Daring. I love the Lightning. But when you talk about others at the tier that are specialized in what they do, Daring kind of falls into the mid. But if you have that commander that allows it to have that ridiculous fire chance for a destroyer, then yes, absolutely, this thing can be very, very good. It also doesn't have quite as many hit points as some of the others on the list for a gunboat. So if you get into a gunboat, the good news is you do have the sonar as well, but it's not really a sonar that you use to counter other destroyers like some of the other sonars out there, specifically German sonars. Like, it's a very short range for ship detection, but it is long duration, allowing you to be very, very utilitarian. It is a utility, right? It is so good as a team support ship, but it isn't necessarily, up here in the top two. So I'm going to put Daring at a B tier. It's a solid ship. I don't hate it, but you have to have a specific commander to really wake the ship up to move it up into an A tier. I don't think it's an S tier, personally, but that's just my opinion. I'm sure your guys' mileage will vary. Des Moines. Des Moines, obviously the king of cruisers. Like, it used to be Balti's. I used to talk about Balti being the king of the cruisers. No, Balti is the queen of the cruisers at tier 7. She just absolutely dominates. Des Moines is hands down the best cruiser in the game. You guys can fight me over this. I'm sure there's a lot of light cruiser players out there to be like, what about the Worcester? What about the... No. Des Moines' ability to absolutely destroy battleships, cruisers, and destroyers is second to none. You can fight me on it all you want, but I'm telling you, Des Moines is that good. So Des Moines is, in my opinion, our first S-tier ship. And I don't think there's actually that many people that'll argue with that. I think Des Moines, it's been nerfed for a reason, and yet the nerfs really haven't affected it. It is fantastic at just absolutely destroying anything that's in front of it. Whether it be using the fantastic HE, the ridiculous DPM, regardless of AP or HE, just melts anything that's in front of it. It's very agile. It's a small enough ship that it can still move around relatively well, and unlike, say, a Worcester, that tends to be a really long ship that struggles with dodging shells. You don't have that issue with the Des Moines. You can play island cover because of the nice firing angle. Like, it's so good. Like, Des Moines is insane. Even somebody like me who tends to be a battleship main, I get in Des Moines and I can absolutely destroy with it. You've seen me Citadel and absolutely neuter Yamatos up close and personal. Of course, that's not really saying anything. Everything can murder a Yamato if they get him up close and personal and catch him. But Des Moines is exceptionally good. It just is. You can carry a game in a Des Moines relatively straightforward and easy if you play correctly. All right, gearing. Gearing, in my opinion, is a solid A tier. It is gunboat extraordinaire, but also has those extremely long-range area denial sort of torpedoes. You know exactly where people spawn, right? The maps don't really change a whole lot. The spawns don't really change a whole lot. So you can put those torpedoes out there and spread them out and absolutely deny an entire portion of the map. And the amount of times I've caught destroyers with these torpedoes coming into a specific area, the amount of times that, you can catch battleships and cruisers off guard because they just keep going. These torpedoes are the Energizer Bunny of the torpedo world. They just keep going, right? There's no stopping them. They just keep going and going and going. However, if there's one thing that I would say about the gearing is that the gearing does tend to fall a little bit flat in one fight in particular. Just one. And that is the Kaaba. The Kaba absolutely craps all over the gearing in a gunfight, unless the Kaba's dumb enough to go broadside, in which case the gearing can load AP and just melt the Kaba. But most Kaba players aren't dumb enough to just sit broadside to somebody who switches to AP, because you will get melted. But gearing, in my opinion, probably, I would say it's S tier, actually. I was going to say A tier, but I truly think its versatility in being able to be a gunboat or a torp boat. It's got decent concealment. It's very agile. It's probably the most agile destroyer at the tier. I would say between it and what was the one we just did, the daring, in terms of agility. But gearing's agility is ridiculous for the tier. So personally, I would take gearing over daring most times, no problem. Kaba in a gunfight obviously probably beats the gearing, but that's because Kaba's entire goal is a gunfight, right? Like, it doesn't have anything else, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So gearing, S tier. I think this thing by itself can absolutely dominate if played well, right? Like, you have the sneakiness to counter those pesky Shimas. You should be running Perceptive to allow you to get close and know where the people are. Then, of course, you've got those torpedoes. The torpedoes are a little bit longer to reload. They don't necessarily do as much damage, but they're legendary tier destroyer torps. They're gonna hurt, right? All right. Hakuru, our first carrier. I'll be real honest, in the right hands, carriers are okay, but honestly, I wouldn't put any of the carriers like above a B tier. And Hakuru, I'm sorry, like, you're the least scary. Yes, you just constantly have planes, but I'm never really like afraid of a Hakuru, right? Like, you just, I don't know. Personally, I haven't had too many issues with legendary carriers in particular, but if I was going to fight a legendary carrier, I would much rather go up against the Haku here than, say, the Midway. Now, moving on, you notice I don't have much to say about the carriers because I don't play them. Like, I just don't really care to play them. I don't think they're particularly amazing. There are plenty of carrier players out there, and to you, more power to you. I just don't like to play them. Kaba. Kaba is fantastic at what it does, right? It is literally a light cruiser. It's not a destroyer. Let's be real. It's not a destroyer. It's a light cruiser, but it's a decently functional light cruiser in terms of it's very good at getting into positions, helping get rid of destroyers, and then becoming a gigantic pain in the neck for everybody else on the team. If it is played in that role, I think it's fantastic. You guys have seen the way I play the Kaba. I tend to go straight in, counter destroyers early, and then turn into sort of the light cruiser role. I see a lot of people play the Kaba wrong. I see a lot of people, and I say wrong. I personally think the Kaba is at its best when it gets rid of destroyers early, and that allows it to move around the map and just absolutely farm everybody, right? That's my personal opinion on the Kaba, but I think Kaba has one glaring weakness, and that weakness is, well, actually it's got two weaknesses, but one glaring weakness, and that is its rudder is absolutely god-awful. It's fast, it's able to use those amazing guns, it's got armor, which is absolutely silly at times at what that armor can do, but it's got that glaring weakness that it cannot turn. Yes, it can dodge incoming shells, but when it comes to like a knife fight versus a destroyer, especially Shima's ability to drop 15 torpedoes in a gigantic spread up close and personal, it's very difficult to dodge torpedoes in those instances, and that leads to many Kabas getting just absolutely yeeted. And that brings me back to what I was saying earlier with how I personally play the Kaba versus other people. I understand why people play it the way they do, playing it more of a standoff light cruiser, attract a lot of damage your way because people get tired of getting shot at by little pea shooters, and so they fire back at you, and you can easily dodge most ships in this thing at any sort of medium range. But the inability to steer really does hurt the ship. And there's really nothing you can do about that. Like, it's got terrible concealment as well. But The terrible concealment and its ability to not steer kind of limit its effectiveness as a destroyer. So for that, while it is fully capable of doing some great things, for me, I have to list Kaba as a B tier. And I know that's going to catch a lot of flack from a lot of Kaba players out there. Go ahead, leave them in the comments below. I'm looking forward to it. And that leads us to Kleber. Now, Kleber is a fantastic ship, but let's be all honest right now. As much as the Kleber is a fantastic ship, it's got the reload booster, it's got the ridiculous guns, it's got a good hit point pool, it's got nasty hard-hitting torpedoes, but the nerf hit this ship hard. And getting up close and personal and dropping your torpedoes is a lot harder nowadays than it was back when the ship first came out. This ship does not have smoke. So you cannot afford early on to put yourself in a position to use the torps effectively. Now, late game, this thing actually becomes an absolute monster. But early game, if you put the ship up there too early, you're going to lose your hit points and you're going to be ineffective for pretty much the rest of the game. So for me, Kleber, it has the ability to do well, but honestly, I have to put this thing as a B tier. I don't know. There are better gunboats in terms of being able to use that DPM longer. Yes, this has burst DPM with the reload booster, but if you don't have a reload booster, Gearing and Kaba both can beat this thing in a gunfight relatively easily. And then, of course, the torpedoes are short-range torpedoes, kind of like the Kaba. So I can't put it above B tier for that reason. Solid. And I know what you guys are thinking. Well, Spartan, you complain about destroyers a lot at Legendary tier, yet you're placing all of these destroyers mid-tier. Well, I mean, I place them as I see them, right? And for me, most of them do fall in the mid-tier. They just do. Kurfürst. Now, this is going to be controversial because I know that the Kurfürst can be very good. But the Kurfürst has one glaring weakness, and that is its size. It's got good guns, surprisingly, for and you can use either the 406s or the 420s or whatever they are. But personally, I think the size of the Kurfürst is its biggest weakness. It's got good armor, but unfortunately, it's so big that you just get pinned everywhere. Super massive superstructure with all the hit points in the world, so people can farm you from everywhere. Gets melted by HE from everything. Like, this thing is just, personally, I find it one of the most difficult battleships to survive long enough to actually make a huge difference. And that's crazy because it has the largest hit point pool at the tier. But for me, when it comes to the tier, I personally think that Kurfürst is one of the most difficult battleships to play. And for that, bottom tier. And again, this is my opinion based on my play style. I personally would rather be in any other ship, pretty much, than the Kurfürst. And that should tell you everything you need to know. Midway. Midway, obviously, going to be better than Hikuru. But if we're being 100% honest, yes, it's absolutely cracked with its ability. Like, its damage output is cracked, but it's limited by its ability to get its planes absolutely ripped out from under it very quickly. So for that, I'm just going to put it right next to its other brother here, and the Hikuru, C tier. We'll just call this the carrier tier. That feels pretty much right. Now, onto the Mino. Mino's fantastic. Mino's DPM is ridiculous. It's got the smoke or radar, so it's got utility there. It's got sonar. It's got great AA as well at the tier. Its guns are insane. It's one of the biggest counters to a Conqueror that you've ever seen in your life. Trust me. If you've ever been in a Conqueror or been in a Mino and shot at a Conqueror, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The ability for the Mino to rip hit points away from the Conqueror faster than it can blink is insane. There's nothing more scary, in my opinion, when it has a good spot and it is undetectable. However, the Mino also has a huge weakness, and the Mino's weakness is, if you look at it the wrong way, it explodes and goes back to port. Has a ridiculous heal, and that's the only reason that most people survive the first hit that they take in it, is because they can heal a good chunk of that damage back because of the British heal. However, its survivability is terrible. So, it is a very fun ship. It's got very good DPM. It's got ridiculous AP. It can melt destroyers in seconds. I would put it at A tier because I personally think it is fantastic. But I also know that as a glaring weakness, its survivability is, once you get spotted, you're not long for this world most of the time. So I'm putting it at A tier, fully aware of the fact that it's an A tier right up until you explode. I don't expect to survive the match in a minute. I just don't. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Oh no. Now we're up to the Montana. Montana, one of my favorite ships in the game. Shocker, I know. Most of you in the comments are already typing out your angry comments. I bet Spartan puts the Montana S tier. You're wrong. I don't put the Montana S tier. While the Montana is very, very good, it has really accurate guns, hard-hitting 16-inch armor piercing. It's got a decent hit point pull. It's got a ridiculous armor belt, which, when utilized properly, make people look silly, including Yamatos, especially Yamatos, because they love to try to shoot for the Citadel. It's still, much like the GK, has one gigantic weakness, and that is, it is gigantic. Having 4 turrets, making the Iowa Hall, or, whatever, even longer, is a huge weakness, and it results in a lot of hard turning ability. You can't turn in this ship, and y'all already know it's got terrible rudder shift. I work with steering gears. I'm used to them, so I can do a lot better with Montana than some people can. But that's not going to sit here. No matter how much I like the ship, I can't sit here and go, yes, it's an S tier, because it's not. It's not. There are ships that can absolutely just take over the entire lobby, and let's be honest, any point during any match, any of these ships are capable of taking over a lobby. They're legendary for a reason, right? But there are ships that stand out even better than the rest of them. And while I enjoy the Montana and I think that it is very underrated, I personally cannot put this at S tier, so I would put Montana as an A tier. I think if you put it lower than that, and I know you can swap these out at any direction depending on your playstyle, but personally, I can't put it at S tier. It doesn't belong at S tier. You could make an argument that it drops to B tier as well, depending. But personally, I tend to do really well in the Montana every time I take it out there. It's one of my better legendary ships. So I rank it A tier. Your mileage may vary, and I'm sure I'll hear it all about it in the comments below. Napoli, the Italian super cruiser. Personally, I have never. Napoli can be very good. Again, it can be very good, but I just don't see Napoli as a huge threat unless I give it a broadside, right? Like if you give it a broadside, just like the Alaska, just like the Stalingrad, you give it a broadside, it's going to make you pay. The difference is that the Napoli doesn't have the utility of the Alaska, so I can't rank it as high as the Alaska in that sense. Can it do really well? Does it have very good guns? Absolutely. Is it tanky? Absolutely. Napoli's tankiness is right there with the Alaska in terms of survivability. Possibly even better because it has, it is an Italian, so it has the concealment and stuff like that. But personally, I don't ever take the Napoli out. I just don't. And so for that, I have to rate it right down here in mid as well. Like, I just feel like it's mid tier. Can it be good? Sure. Do I play it? Nope. There are better ships that I would rather play than Napoli. And so there you go. Schlieffen is insanely good. I don't think anybody can argue against it being insanely good. It's got great guns. It's got insane secondaries. It's got insane torpedoes. The one downside to the torpedoes is that they're slow. But most of the time, you don't have trouble hitting with the torpedoes on this thing because you're so close that it doesn't matter how slow they are. You're going to hit the torpedoes. And the secondaries do have the HE, so they set fires. And they fire really quickly. And they're very accurate, unlike some of the other secondaries, like the Kurfürst. The secondaries of the Schlieffen are very accurate, meaning you get lots of fires. So burning down ships, second to none. Like when it comes to secondaries, like your ability to take away damage controls from ships is ridiculous. And then you combine that with the fact you have those torpedoes, so you get those permafloods, or you just outright dev strike somebody with torpedoes. It's hard to argue that Schlieffen is not an S tier. The only argument that somebody could make that Schlieffen isn't S tier is its survivability. It does have the ability to be absolutely punished by a Yama that knows what they're doing. But let's be honest, Yama can punish everything if they know what they're doing. So for that, I have to put Schlieffen S tier. Like, it's insane. Colombo is very, very good. And as much as I love the Colombo, it's the torpedoes, the long-range sonar, right? And then on top of that, you also have the ability to burn people down with the secondaries. So that's why Colombo isn't higher, and that's why Schlieffen is S tier. It's got it all. It's got utility, it's got insane guns and torps and secondaries. Like, it's got the whole package. Plus, you get a lot of heals. So, yeah, I personally love the Schlieffen. Shimakaze. Oh, this is going to be a tough one. As much as I would love to put the Shimakaze at S tier, I can't. Shimakaze, absolutely devastating. But it really does struggle in a lobby of people that can counter it. Whether it be Gearings, Kabas, Clabers, Darings, any of the radars, especially the heavy cruisers, Mino, like, oh my god. There's so many ships that can counter the Shima. Why is it one of the most played, if not the most played ship in the game then? Simple. You have, at any given time, roughly 370,000 damage of torpedoes that you can just spread out there and let happen. It doesn't matter. You use the longer range torpedoes, you got 11 kilometers of range of 23,000 damage a pop. Insane amounts of damage. And very sneaky, being able to just go around, do whatever it wants, grabbing caps. But it suffers a very similar fate to the Kaba. It just does not have that turning rate that you would need to get away from other Shimas and other destroyers' torpedoes. So a lot of times you see Shimas just running straight into a wall of skill and dying, right? We've all seen it. So as good as the Shima's torps are, it's very one-dimensional. It has very good guns, but the DPM on the guns is so low that it really does struggle to defend itself against any gunboat out there. Any of them. Can it do damage with the guns? Absolutely. Can it catch and finish off other destroyers? Absolutely. Should they? Absolutely, if they get the opportunity. But if it's an even footing and you get caught in a Shima versus a Gearing, a Mino, a Daring, a Claber, probably Holland, I would imagine, but I don't have it yet, you're gonna get gunned down before you get the chance to do anything. Your only hope is to hurry up and drop torps and hope that you get them as well. But for that, I have to put the Shima at A tier. And now we're on to the Stalingrad. Now, Stalingrad is everything that the Alaska is except for the utility side of it. And it has one glaring weakness. Unlike the Alaska, this thing has a raised citadel, meaning if you overangle in the Stalingrad, you get sent back to port in a hurry. Period. Now, they did just buff it by giving it HE, which I personally think is more of a nerf than a buff, because most people that I see playing the Stalingrad right now are spamming HE. If you spam HE out of a Stalingrad, you are vastly underplaying the effectiveness of the ship's AP. So personally, I don't even use the HE unless I'm going to try to radar a destroyer, right? That's about the only thing I would use the HE on this thing for. Obviously, if people are bow tanking you or whatever, it does make sense to switch to the HE in those instances. But if your first goal is to shoot HE out of this thing, you're going to be very, very sad. And most people are not going to fear you. If you're using it as there are way better fire starters out here. We'll get to that in a moment. But Stalingrad, as much as I like the guns of the ship, it is insanely accurate. It has very punchy guns, fully capable of citadeling battleships at range. It's very good bow in. If you over angle, you're done. It has terrible turning, unlike the Alaska, which has decent turning. It's not the best agile cruiser in the world, but you can actually turn it, whereas this thing starts to turn relatively well, and then it just suddenly stops turning about halfway through. And why is that a bad thing? Because if you get caught while you're turning, you're dead. There is no pass and go, no collecting $200. Stalingrad goes back to port. So, again, I would have to put this at B tier. B tier. I don't think it's as bad as the carriers. I think it has better carry potential, at least in my opinion, because I feel so useless as a carrier player. Like, my teams don't survive long enough for me to be useful in a carrier. You know what I mean? Am I the only one that feels that? Like, I know I'm not the best carrier player in the world, but I try to do my job as a carrier, and my teams are dead so fast that I never get to be effective as a carrier player. So that's why I don't play them. I can be more effective quicker in any other ship. Carriers get more and more effective as the game goes on. And if your team isn't useful in the first 3 minutes of the match and they all get yeeted, your carrier ain't going to be able to do much of anything either. Now, we're on to the Worcester. Worcester is actually ridiculous. It's got great AP, it's got great HE, it's fully capable of firing 10,000 damage every, 3 seconds with AP. Then, of course, it's got great HE as well. So, personally, Worcester, I would put it at S tier if it wasn't for the fact that the ship doesn't turn very well. It's a really long ship. It's got a lot of guns, but it just doesn't turn very well. And for that, you tend to get caught. And when you get caught in the Worcester, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I just overpinned the Worcester. If you catch a Worcester well, generally speaking, you citadel it. Because it's usually turning, it's trying to dodge, it just can't get out the way in time. And usually when that happens, you end up citadeling them. They can be absolutely devastating with the DPM otherwise. Like if they catch you while they're behind an island, you can't shoot at them. Holy mother of God. But if you catch them out in the open, it's really not that difficult to get rid of a Worcester. Because it's such a big ship. You're going to get penetrations. You're going to get citadels if you catch it. Like, it's nasty. But it's not S tier. It's good, but it's not S tier. So, A tier it is for the Worcester. And that brings us to the last one. The Yamato, aka the Yamato. What do I think about the Yamato? Well, honestly, it is the easy button for a reason. It is S tier. In terms of battleships, it doesn't get any easier to play than the Yamato. I know there's a lot of people out there. I see the video, or I see the comments from people that say, man, I can't play the Yama every time I take it out. The armor is terrible on the Yama. You just get sent back to port. It's like, no, if you think the armor is terrible on the Yamato, then you're doing something incorrect. Either you're too close and you're getting caught coming around islands where you're broadside, or if you're just not paying attention to crossfires, so you're getting caught broadside. Yama's armor is insanely good if you know how to use it. The only thing that truly counters a Yama while it's bow in is another Yama, or destroyers, or fire starters. But other than that, it's another Yama. Yamas are insane. The ability to overmatch 32 millimeters of bow armor, which means basically everything in the game with the exception of a couple of the Germans out there. It's second to none. It's got amazingly fast reload for a battleship for the size of guns as well. I think the base reload is 26 seconds, so you can get that down even faster than that now. Get it down to like 24 seconds, maybe even lower. I haven't really tried to go full DPM build, but Yama, it's literally just you're devastation every time you take it out. A bad salvo out of a Yama, you hit 1 or 2 shells, you still do almost 10,000 damage. Like, it's insane. If you've never shot another ship through the bow for almost 30,000 damage, you're not living. You're not doing something right. Because the Yama, it is disgusting. You catch somebody bowing, you're like, okay, you think you can just bow tank me? I'm a Yamato. Straight through the bow, 20 to 30k. Easy. Easy. And like I said, if you get bad RNG in the Yamato, you still hit 1 or 2 shells, you're still doing anywhere from 5 to 10,000 damage with 1 or 2 shells. It's crazy. But I'm sure somebody will try to put... I honestly, I don't think anybody's going to argue that. I personally think I've done a pretty good job of ranking everything here. I think that the majority of the ships at Legendary tier are, comparable. I think you could easily swap any of these ships at A and B between each other. Like, you could easily drop Montana, you could drop Alaska, or raise Burgoyne, raise Colombo, depending on daring. You could switch any of these two out at any given moment, right? But I think everybody can agree that these 4 ships as the S tier are just, they're on a different level. Schlieffen is insane. Yama is insane. Gearing is insane. Yes, it can be countered by the Kaba, but that's really it. And even then, if the Kaba's dumb and goes broadside, the Gearing is fully capable of removing a Kaba just as quickly as a Kaba can remove a Gearing, right? And then Des Moines, I think when it comes to cruisers, I don't think there's a better cruiser in the game than Des Moines. I think most people would agree with that. Now, again, I don't have the Henri, I don't have the Colbert, I don't have the Holland. I'm working on all of these, except for the Colbert. I can't get that, but I don't think anybody's ranking a Colbert at S tier. It's just not. Colbert would be B tier, possibly even C tier, because it's just not that effective in most games. It's got to stay so far away, and then it can't hit anything. If you utilize the ridiculous fire rate of the Colbert, you're always going to put yourself in a situation where you get countered very quickly. Like, again, it's kind of like a Mino, except it has better armor than the Mino, but it doesn't have the smoke screen either. And it has no utility. There's no utility there. So it's not even to help your team at all. Its only job is DPM. That's it. So Colbert, I would probably put B or C tier personally. Henri IV, I love the French heavy cruisers. I really do. I loved the Charles Martel. I find them to be a little bit squishy in my opinion in terms of what they can and can't do, but they're very agile. They've got really good guns. They maybe lack a little bit of that lobbing over the island sort of deal, and I'm assuming that Henri will be pretty much the same in that regard. So for me, it's kind of probably going to be an A tier ship. I think it's very, very good. It's got utility with I believe it would have sonar, right? Maybe the sonar gets swapped out for a reload booster. I don't know. I'm just guessing at this point. But if it doesn't have that utility, I could see it dropping to B tier. But I feel like the guns on French cruisers are so good that if you utilize them correctly, they've got great AP, great HE. They got torpedoes as well, so you've got a leg up on the Americans in that term. So personally, I like them. So I would see that if I had to rank them, Henri would be an A, possibly B tier, high B tier, if nothing. And then of course, the Holland, I think would be probably B tier. I don't think it's anything special. Maybe something will change my mind. I'm about to unlock it, so you guys will know soon enough what I actually think about it. But personally, I don't ever fear the Holland in any destroyer. I literally have not walked into a fight with a Holland and gone, yeah, I'm scared. I'm really not. The Holland is good with fast reloading torpedoes, right? Gun-wise, it's meh. I don't know. You guys will let me know, I'm sure. And then, of course, what was the other one we haven't? So that was the Holland, the Colbert, the Henri, the Zhao. The Zhao, the newcomer. Zhao, I think, is going to be nasty as a fire spammer. It's got 203 millimeter guns as well, I believe. So it's an 8-inch cruiser, which means it's going to pin a lot. But it's going to be a fire spammer more than anything. Yes, it probably has decent AP. I mean, it's 8-inch guns. AP is going to be decent, but I don't think that in my experience with Japanese heavy cruisers, the AP penetration angles aren't good enough to really utilize them. Most situations, you're going to be better off shooting HE, unless, of course, somebody's dumb enough to go full broadside at a decently close range. But I think more often than not, you're going to be utilizing the HE out of the ZOW more than anything else. Shocker. I know. It's Japanese heavy cruiser. And then, of course, the torpedoes. The torpedoes are a trap. Okay? If you are using the torpedoes regularly, you better be a long ways away and capable of dodging. Because if you don't, you're going to be sent back to port. Just like every other Japanese heavy cruiser in the game. If you get caught, you're going back to port. That's just how it works, okay? I don't make the rules. That's just how it works. So if I had to rank it, I would say that the ZOW, as much as it does have the utility and capabilities, I wouldn't rank it probably above. I mean, it's got a lot of torpedoes because it's got four or five torp launchers, so quintuple launchers. So it's got 20 torpedoes. I think they're Shima torps, so they're like 23,000 damage a pop. If you're launching them, they probably got at least 11 kilometers, if not more range. But they're terrible torp angles. It's a kiting sort of cruiser, so it's going to lack in the carryability in most situations. You're going to have to rely on your teammates to grab caps, because if you try to move in and grab the caps, you're just going to get ripped apart more often than not. So yeah, I personally would probably rank the ZOW right there at B tier as well. We've got plenty of fire spammers in the game. I don't see it being much different. We look at tier 7 and what the Japanese heavy cruisers do at tier 7. You can pretty much guess that that's what the ZOW is going to do for the most part at legendary tier. But anyway, that's my thoughts. That's my tier list. That's my rankings. I'm looking forward to the way you guys tell me how wrong I am down in the comments below. You guys never fail me. So I know this is a longer video, but there's a lot of ships, and I had to get through all of them. So let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are. Don't forget, I will leave a link to this in the description or in a comment. I might pin a comment down there to put the link if you guys want to come over, do your own videos, or if you guys want to do your own tier list, rank them yourselves. But I'm looking forward to what you guys say. And if you like what I'm doing, punch the like button, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, I will see you in the next video.